Welcome back to the Blueprint to Ultra podcast with your hosts, Steve Epifano and Jeff Winchester. We exist to help you put together your own plan for your next Ultra. We do this by interviewing a variety of guests that range from back of the pack to elite runners that share their own experiences from all of us to learn from. This episode's guest will no doubt give you plenty of tips and insights for your own plan. She is currently a CTS Ultra running coach and has an extensive resume of races, including the most recent race, the Ouray 100 miler, which was her fourth finish, the Arizona Monster, which is a 300 miler, and my favorite race, the Cocodona 250, the Moab 240, and a handful of other races from 50K all the way up to 100K distances. She didn't always have a time for running while she was training as a ballerina from a younger age until college, so that'll be an interesting transition as we get into it. This guest also hails from a state that holds a special place in my heart, West Virginia. Without further ado, please welcome Anne Tisdell to this week's episode.
Anne, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're excited to have you too. So Anne, as Steve said in the very beginning and during his intro, he said that you actually came with a ballerina background. And so when we saw that in your pre-episode email that we sent you and you put that, I thought, I don't think we've ever talked to a ballerina at all. So this is going to be an interesting kind of like transition here. So help us to understand this. Like, how does somebody who was trained as a ballerina, right? And that's what you grew up doing. How did you make this kind of like switch to becoming an ultra runner? And as Steve said, even a certified coach at some point, like we'll get to that later on maybe, but that doesn't seem to kind of jive very well for people to understand that there's a ballerina and there is a ultra runner. How did we get here?
I would say, there was a pretty decent gap in between the two. So there wasn't like a perfect segue from one into the other. I would say two things that did translate really well from one world to the other. Discipline, for sure. I've got that. And just mind-body awareness. I do think that has served me really well as a runner. But yeah, growing up, I was not into sports. I never played a group sport in my life. Ballet was kind of my focus up until the point where I got into college. And I don't know if you all had to do the presidential fitness test back in high school, where they make you run a mile from one of the challenges. Did you ever have to do that?
Mm-hmm. No, I'm too old.
Well, I thought it was the worst thing in the world. It was painful and awful, and I did not enjoy it. And I probably wore my brother's sneakers because I didn't have any running shoes. It was awful. So I am not a born runner. I did not grow up a runner. And then many, many years later, so probably well after college, my husband and I discovered this TV show about these two guys who did ultra marathons. And we thought, first, what is that? Second, why would somebody do that? And then we watched enough episodes and just became really intrigued. And one morning woke up and said, oh my gosh, I had a dream that I did one of those races that we were watching the TV show about. And he said, I had the same dream. Should we just sign up for one? And we were like, okay, sure. So we found the North Face Endurance Challenge 50K in the DC area, which was where we lived at the time, and just signed up for it and kind of figured it out from there. So year one, I think this was 2017, maybe, we did that 50K. The next year we thought, oh, that was fun. We should try an Ironman, even though we don't own bikes. Like swimming for us is playing in the lake. So of course we signed up for one of those, did that the next year, and then kind of found our way back to ultra, and it's just kind of spiraled from there. So that's how we came from there to where we are today.
I like that a lot. You actually said something that got my attention. And so I'm going to kind of circle back to the first thing you said, that being a ballerina actually gave you an advantage, you think, when it comes to mind-body awareness as a runner. And I do think there's a connection of being able to have mind-body awareness as a runner, like being able to understand those connections and stuff. So if you could kind of explain what that means to you, so that those who are listening who think, I'm just going out for a run.
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean by that? So what do you mean by mind-body awareness as a runner?
I think the biggest thing to reference first is that I train, and all of my athletes that I work with, we train by rate of perceived exertion, RPE, versus having a specific pace target. And that is all about, how am I feeling in this moment? Would I consider this to be a 4 out of 10? Is this a 5 out of 10? Is this a 7 out of 10? And starting to understand the differences between all of those things. And then on race day, being able to say, my plan for this 100-mile race is to be at a 4 out of 10 for the first 50 miles and a 5 out of 10 for the last 50 miles, or some variation of that. And I just feel like I have such a good sense of how my heart rate feels, not what my watch is telling me, because 50% of the time that's craziness, but how my heart rate is feeling, how my breathing is, how much I'm sweating, how my stomach is feeling, and just being really in tune with those things, I think is a huge advantage, especially just being a runner who trains and races by RPE primarily.
I think it's great that you coach by RPE, because Jeff and I both coach by RPE as well instead of heart rate or pace. And I think one of the hardest things for runners to learn, especially those coming from road running or even like the Ironman or the triathlon like type distances, is that shift from pace and heart rate to an RPE.
Well, I think there's an application for pace-based training, and specifically, let's say you're trying to qualify for the Boston Marathon. Then there's going to have to be some kind of circumstance where we at least test, how does your RPE that's sustainable for the marathon distance translate to a pace that would hopefully get you that qualifying time that you need. But especially, well, the two of you know the kinds of races that I generally prefer to do, which are mountainous or just really, really long and typically on kind of rough terrain. It wouldn't make as much sense for me to say, well, I'm going to have a 10-minute mile target for all of my runs this week if 50% of them are on the road in my neighborhood and the other 50% are on really rocky, slick, tough terrain. It just doesn't translate apples to apples. So I feel like, especially for trail runners, RPE just makes a ton of sense when you're training on a bunch of varying terrain.
Yeah, I agree. And I think when you're looking at even those who need to sometimes run by pace, right? If you're talking about for those who are training for like a Boston qualifier or something like that, they still need to understand how that feels. You know, they're going to run at those faster efforts and they want to understand kind of what their body's doing in those moments and kind of that level of exertion. Like, it's cool to say you're going to go run a 6-minute mile, but if you can't maintain it because you feel like absolute crap, then you need to know that maybe that's a level of exertion that you can't hit. And so let's figure out how we can start training at a little bit higher exertions to where we can start bringing our pace down secondarily as opposed to primarily. And I think it's a solid point that you talked about. And the other thing that I really like is, and a lot of runners miss this, is that when you train by RPE in your training runs and you have these different variations of a lactate threshold or VO2 max, whatever it is that your coach is giving you, you should understand that when you go to a race, if you're doing a race that has elevation stuff, you may feel that level of exertion. And the whole goal is to be able to kind of drop those cylinders or those RPEs at different points in the race and understand you're going to have ups, you're going to have downs, and you can bring it all the way down and recover in the middle of a race because you recognize what the recoverable pace feel is. And so I think it's an art to learn that mind-body awareness. I like the term there. I think it's an art to understand what your RPE is and how you can kind of apply it in different circumstances, not only in training, but in a race. So thank you for being a ballerina and seeing that connection. It's fantastic. Let's, though, talk about your own RPE. You just had an absolutely incredible effort a little less than 2 weeks ago, right? You were out in Ouray, Colorado. And for those who don't know, Miss Anne ran the Ouray 100, which has 41,862 feet of gain. Over the course of the race, there's
incredible.
Oh my God. Over the course of the race, there's 83,000 feet of change, so ups and downs. And this is what the astounding thing is to me. There's a couple points here that the highest point is 13,365 feet above sea level. That's almost 2.5 miles above sea level. Like, that's pretty tall. The lowest point is 7,600, which has still got its own altitude challenges. But the average is 10,000 feet of elevation, which is, again, ridiculous.
It's high.
It's high. Yeah, it's Colorado high. And this is how, when you hear numbers like that, it doesn't really kind of resonate with a lot of, of us mid back to the Packers a lot of times. But when I tell you this, that it's 102 miles and you have a 52-hour cutoff, like, you have over 2 days to run 102 miles. Most, particularly on the East Coast where I live, us flatlanders, like, our races are going to be 30-hour cutoff. And so you got a whole 22 more hours just to finish this particular race. So it's a doozy. Anne, this year was your best performance ever. You got third place female. Congratulations on podium. Your favorite race, according to your ultrasignups, because you run it all the time.
I'm just nuts. That's all.
So I have done my best to try to describe it. I've kind of rattled off probably way too long to outline what this race looks like from somebody who can just go to Google or go to ultrasignup and read about it. From your perspective, for myself, like, again, I live on the East Coast. I live in a beach town and stuff. If I were to be at the line of Ouray, describe what I see.
A lot of nervous people. Well, I'll say, so if you haven't been out to Ouray, Colorado, it's a really cool town, very small town, kind of nestled immediately in between 10,000 foot peak, 11,000 foot peak, 12,000 foot peak. You could literally walk from the coffee shop across the street to a trailhead and go up to 12,000 feet. And in fact, the second half of the race, the main aid station is right there in the baseball park in the middle of town. So you kind of run into town, cross the road, hit a trailhead, go up to 10,000 feet, go back into town, cross the road, hit a trailhead, go up to 12,000 feet. It's really cool. And I will say, so you looking at my ultra sign up, you might think, wow, she might just love this race. And every year when I'm climbing those mountains, I'm thinking, what is wrong with me? This is so hard. It's just awful. But at the same time, it's probably one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen in my entire life. It's incredibly, incredibly difficult, but also as a result, very rewarding when you're able to push yourself through that and get to the finish line. And then the real kicker is on Sunday. So the final cutoff is 12 p.m. on Sunday. Practically everybody comes back and they're standing by those two orange cones that are the finish line of the race. And they're cheering on those final finishers. And it's just it's a wonderful environment. I feel like that's everything that ultra running should be. Wonderful people having an adventure in the mountains, supporting one another. That's the thing that kind of sucks me back in year after year.
It's 41,000 feet of gain, Anne.
Almost 42,000 feet.
I mean, it's a ton.
Yeah, let's round up. I'd like to round up to 42,000, please. That sounds better.
Might as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of gain. So the thing that is, when I get to talk to somebody who's run a race like this or has this type of experience, again, I use myself as the analogy all the time because I live in Eastern North Carolina. It is flat. I live in a beach town. And there is a difference when you run in the mountains. We want to talk to you about training as an athlete, as a coach, and how you kind of do this for yourself and how you kind of do something like this, because you live in West Virginia, so you're on the East Coast. Now, there is some mountains in West Virginia, but they're like hills compared to what you're talking about in Colorado. And there's no offense to our good friends in West Virginia, right? But it is a different animal of climb. So let's talk about altitude first, which oftentimes we kind of get confused. We think in terms, you're going to be talking about climbing and vert and elevation, but let's talk about altitude itself, because that's a different ballgame than just learning how to climb up the side of the mountain.
Yeah.
What do you do to prepare for altitude? And if you'd like to share, what is the effect of altitude?
Oh, absolutely. So what we've kind of found through the years, for me, and altitude affects everybody a little bit differently. Some people adapt really well and they could probably go out there 72 hours before the race and feel okay. That's not the case for me. Year one, I think we got there maybe a week before. Year two, maybe 10 days before. And now my husband and I are very, very lucky that we work primarily remotely. So we've been able to go out 4-6 weeks in advance just to be at high altitude, do some training, and let our bodies fully adapt to that kind of situation, because we've just realized we need it. Like if we actually want to feel, I can't even say our best, but if we want to feel somewhat decent in this race, it's kind of a requirement for the two of us. So that's a really big part. And I recognize that we're very lucky that we're even able to do that. So this year we went out to Breckenridge for several weeks, so we're staying at 10,000 and then we're able to train up to 14,000, which was hugely beneficial, both because we're able to make the physiological adaptations to the altitude, but also you just get a much better understanding of, this is how this is going to affect my pace. And this is how it's going to affect my appetite and my hydration. And there are a lot of little things that you have to tweak a little bit when you're racing at 12,000 feet versus sea level where we live. So that's a huge advantage, getting out there early and just acclimatizing.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, though, my Achilles heel with this race is nausea. And even having been at 10,000 feet for a month leading up to the race, I was extremely nauseous for the first 60 miles or so. And this is kind of the status quo for me. I've realized it happens every single year. The first 60 miles of the race are just generally higher. And then you're able to come down to that low point of 7,800 or whatever it is. And I start feeling much better after that point. But nausea's been a huge battle for me. This was the first year where, yes, I was extremely nauseous. Yes, I was throwing up on the side of the trail, and I threw up on my husband's shoes again this year, which I really tried not to do. But I had a really good nutrition plan that allowed me to stay on top of my nutrition, despite the fact that I was still feeling really crummy for probably 30 hours out of the race. So that was a huge thing too. Just having a nutrition hydration plan that suited my stomach, knowing it was going to be pretty upset, and having the ability to get out there early and just spend some time up high.
Can we pause there for a second? Because you said you had nausea, and one of the things that you then said is that it was okay because you had a good nutrition plan despite that. And so I found that fascinating. Like, it got my attention because so many people, myself included, when I get nauseous, I don't do well on a nutrition plan. So how did you maintain your nutrition plan despite feeling nauseous when most people don't feel like they can eat at all?
That's been the hardest thing in the past. So previous 3 years when I finished the race, the same nausea would happen, the same vomiting would happen, and I would just feel so bad that nothing in my pockets was going to go in my mouth. It just wasn't going to happen. And then as a result, I have the world's biggest bonk, which takes hours to pull myself out of, and it's resulted in much slower finish times. This year, just knowing that was my history with this race, I've really focused on liquid carbs as my primary source of fuel, and then extremely liquidy gels and other things to supplement that. So I have a drink mix where I get 50 grams of carbs in each of my soft flasks in my vest. That's getting me almost 2 hours worth of nutrition alone. And I did not leave a single aid station without those 2 soft flasks with 50 grams of carbs in each. And then I just made sure I was specifically choosing gels that I knew I could slurp down really quickly and easily, especially gels that were kind of on the liquidy side in terms of consistency. And then I think it comes back to that word earlier, discipline. Just, no, I'm not feeling so good right now. Is it worth the consequences of having a huge bonk in 7 hours if I fall behind on my nutrition? No. So even though I'm not feeling good, I bet I could take a few sips of this drink and not throw it up. So let's give it a try. So that's kind of how I proceeded. Lots of liquids, lots of slurpable calories. And then every aid station, it would be things like take a few sips of soda, take a few sips of broth. Just what can you get in, even if it's 10, 20 calories at a time? Just keep it coming in as much as possible.
I like it. Steve, you were going to say.
No, I think that's really interesting. Selfishly, for myself, again, I'm like 200 feet above sea level. I live right on the ocean. I do a lot of climbing, but I'm not able to get at altitude, and I can't get out to my race. I'm running the Mammoth 200 coming up. Can't get out to my race that early. Yeah, so it'll be a lot of fun, except that's the only thing that scares me is the altitude, not so much the elevation or the climbing, because I know I can handle the climbs. But is there anything that you would suggest for an athlete like me who's on the East Coast to kind of supplement that? I do a lot of sauna training, which in the USCA training, they say that's a kind of a good replacement for training at altitude, where you have somewhat the same adaptation.
I would say number one, get as fit as possible. The fitter you are, the better you're going to adapt to the altitude, the more quickly you'll adapt to the altitude. So fitness first, above all else. As you're thinking about, and I don't know what your ability to travel out there is, as you're thinking about the travel window, sometimes you'll get the recommendation, if you can't get there at least a week in advance, get there the night before the race. Well, that's great if your race is going to be done in a day. But if your race is going to take 70 plus hours, then you're actually landing yourself smack in that window where you're going to feel your absolute worst right in the middle of your 200 miler. So I would try to get there at least 72 hours beforehand. So will you have actually made meaningful adaptations? No, but will you be out of that window where you'll be feeling your absolute worst? Yes. So that's meaningful. And this is another situation where I think RPE is kind of king. As long as you're still sticking to a reasonable RPE for a 200 miler, which is reasonably going to be in the 4 to 5 range, maybe moments of 6 if they're limited. 4 to 5 range, no moments of 6. That's automatically going to help you just make those adjustments you need to your pace in that different environment without you having to worry too much. Well, and then you'll be able to get a sense for, all right, how's my pace going to look here at Mammoth versus when I'm back at home training in North Carolina or 2,000 feet above sea level. So I'd say trust your RPE. It will help to make the pace adjustments that you need. Get there at least 72 hours in advance if you can. And then also just hydrate. Make sure you're hydrating appropriately, because that increased respiration rate or just breathing more heavily at high altitude, every one of those exhales, you're losing some moisture from your body. So make sure that you're replacing that. Not to mention some dehydration that comes with just adaptations at high altitude. So those would be a few things I would think of. And of course, fitness is number one. The fitter you can be going into the race, the better your body will adapt to those different environments.
So I want to come back to how do we get fitter for a race in a minute. But take me to Ouray. What if you were to take the entire race in its totality and your experience this year? At what point did you realize it was going so much better than it had in the past?
You know what's funny? It went worse than I wanted it to go. So it's almost hard to think of it from that perspective. So I went into, I'm sure if you were looking at kind of previous year's results, year 1 was 48 hours and something. Year 2 was 49 hours and something. I threw up a lot that year. Number 3 was 43 hours and change. That's when I really started to kind of nail my pacing and get a little bit better at nutrition. This year, what I really wanted to do was try to break 40 hours. And I knew it was an aggressive goal. I kind of knew everything would have to go perfectly for me for that to happen. And I didn't do it. So there's part of me that comes away from this race knowing, sure, it was 8 hours faster than my slowest time in this exact same race. Like, that's substantial. That's a sign of improvement. But it also wasn't what I was hoping to accomplish. So what I would say is getting into, so there's an aid station called Ironton. It's kind of around the marathon mark. It's the first time you see your crew. You've been out there for typically 7 to 9 hours at that point. So you've kind of had a long day. You already hit 12,000 feet multiple times. You hit 13,000 feet. So generally people come into Ironton feeling kind of wrecked. I came in there just well ahead of the times that I ever come into Ironton, seeing my crew. And that's when I started to think, okay, things are trending in the right direction. And then the nausea really started to become an issue. So by probably Saturday morning, so we're 1 day into the race, I started to realize, yeah, this time goal, it's not looking good. Something pretty miraculous would have to happen in the second half of this race. So I'd say to answer your question directly, marathon mark, just being well ahead of my previous times and still feeling good, still operating at the exact same RPE that I had in previous years, but just being faster at that same RPE. That's when I knew it was going to go better. And then the next morning, 24 hours in, when I'm getting to that 60-mile mark or so, that's when I knew the goal's not going to happen, but I might as well just keep chugging as hard as I can and see what I can do.
So let me flip this. How would you tell your athlete who just gave that explanation that they didn't get their goal time, but they set a PR in one of their repeat races? What would you say to them?
I mean, I would be proud of them. I might also say, somebody sent me an email, actually the makers of the drink mix that I love so much. They sent me an email yesterday that said, hey, congratulations on Ouray. since you didn't get 40 hours, I guess you've got a good reason to go back next year, right? And I thought, I love you and I hate you right now because you're exactly right.
That's so good.
You can use it. I'd say celebrate the wins. Yes,
yeah.
It's great to have improvement. And then maybe use the miss as impetus for tweaking the training a little bit or going back and trying again next year. And I've already got some ideas around that. I think at this point, I realize what I need to do if I want to get better next year. So we've got a plan.
Well, because you're dialing it in. I mean, you said 48 hours, then 49 hours, then you hit at 43. And at 43, you're definitely dialing it in at that point. Like, at that point, you've gotten some improvements and figured some things out. Yeah. And when you hit 41, despite not getting your goal, right? When you still hit a PR, despite not getting your goal, you are still dialing in really, really well. And so I like to challenge ourselves sometimes, particularly where we don't always celebrate ourselves very well. We like to celebrate other people. At some point, we do have to celebrate ourselves. So I say kudos to you and congratulations on a hard-fought, victory in my mind. You didn't win the race, but you won your own personal race, which is what I think is huge.
It's incredible.
So how does Steve get fitter? Yeah, Steve, this is for you. How does Steve get fitter?
Good. I am not fit.
I'll tell you what my plan is. So one of my greatest strengths as a runner, and there aren't a ton of them, but one of my greatest strengths is that I'm just incredibly consistent. And what I realized is I can do basically the equivalent of a recovery run for a really, 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 really long time. Like Arizona Monster was recovery run effort for a really long time. Ouray was recovery run effort for a really long time. In fact, I actually had a negative split in Ouray. So I was 30 seconds per mile faster in the back half just because I know how my body should feel in order to do a 100-miler, and I can just put my head down and just chug, chug, chug. The problem is if I actually want to get more fit and more competitive at some of these races, my 4 RPE is going to have to get faster. Like, that's the thing. There's not room for improvement in pacing myself. There's maybe marginal room for improvement in nutrition and hydration, maybe marginal room for improvement in aid station stop management and efficiency. But what's really going to have to happen to turn the dial is making that 4 RPE a solid level faster. So the plan is, and of course, as coaches, this is going to sound super familiar. I'm going to do the most relevant stuff for my races as close to them as possible. So let's just say, well, I can use a real life example. Arizona Monster next year, I'm going to have to do the slow, high volume stuff with the heavy pack right before that race. So let's say 3 months leading up to Arizona Monster, it's steady state intervals or 7 RPE, 20 to 30, maybe 40 minutes at a time. It's hiking/jogging. Before that, I'm going to work on lactate threshold probably for about 2 months. So think 10-minute intervals, 12-minute intervals, just trying to make my body more efficient. And before that, I'll do a nice VO2 max block to just help my heart deliver as much blood as possible to my working muscles. So once I'm kind of recovered from Ouray, take a little time off from structured training, that'll be the progression. VO2 max, high intensity, low volume, then lactate threshold for about 2 months, moderate volume, moderate intensity, and then we do the big volume stuff right before the race. And I admittedly don't love doing speed work. And so I've been lazy about it for the last few years. And now I'm just kind of realizing, well, if I want to get better, if I want to get faster, I've dialed in all the little stuff. And now that's going to be the big thing that will actually make the difference.
That lines up perfectly with what you're supposed to do in training. Whether I've done that or not, that's completely different. I might be a speed block and a high volume block at the same time right now with Mammoth. But you can't hear me?
No, I'm kidding.
You're just not hearing me because you're a coach.
Yeah. I mean, when you say that, I just hear recipe for injury, but that's a whole nother conversation. So,
yeah. So, that's the thing I have is consistency. So I'm always out there running and climbing. So I have that going for me.
I think it's a really good point. Now, in ultra running, a lot of us don't think that we need to be doing speed work because it's supposed to be slow and go, right? And you don't need to do that. But Even for myself, I joke around that I'm an older athlete, right? I'm in early 50s. So some people who listen, they're like, you're not old. Well, in my brain, I feel old. But I recognize that I have to pay attention to doing speed work as well, even though I'm not fast. I'm never going to be fast, but it actually helps me maintain being able to stay at least at a certain pace, and the whole goal of speed work, that in my understanding is so that my low end can rise to be a little bit faster when it needs to be. But if you're trying to just make your RPE 4 that you call to your easy run faster, it ends up not being an RPE 4. Right? If you just check, well, it's my easy run. My easy runs are getting easier. I'm like, are they? Or are you just picking up your pace? Like, you don't need to pay attention to that a lot. I think a lot of people hate the recovery run because they don't think it's helpful, but I think they need to get very comfortable in that groove. And so you keep your easy runs easy. We say this all the time, right? Keep your easy runs easy, your hard runs hard, whatever you want to say. But if you've got a low end run, by God, make it a low end. And it can be slow. It can be slower than you want it to be. But biomechanically, you need to be able to learn how to run slow. And then you do the speed work so that that slow is easy faster. So
exactly.
I appreciate it.
And I think that if you enjoy running slow and easy, you can make a certain amount of progress just by progressively adding volume over time. And that's kind of the focus that I had this year leading up to Ouray. I was like, well, I don't feel like doing the speed work, if I'm being honest with myself, but I'll do more hours. And I do think that made a meaningful difference. But there's a cap on that. There's a certain point where it's not realistic to do more hours. And in order to maximize the hours that I'm now doing, I'm going to have to add some intensity to some of those.
Yeah, even having strides on the end of some of your easy runs is a win. I mean, it's like giving your body the ability to have that physical turnover and reminding it, oh, we can do this. Right? I think it's an important thing to do. So, Steve, that's how you get fitter.
Well, that's good. And I've been discussing with my group training clients that you can run like easy effort, low effort, like slower, if you want to call it that, but to not run lazy. Because sometimes when we have an easy run, we have a tendency to run lazy where we're just like kind of trotting along and not paying attention to form. So I've really been trying to get everybody consistent with still maintaining your proper form, still having a good cadence while you're running, and keeping that going, because that will help you in the long run overall with a recovery run as well.
I like that. I don't think I've ever used the term "don't run lazy." I like that a lot. I tend to say every run should have intention, right? But I like the run "don't run lazy" because I do think people can kind of, it's an easy run today. I can blow it off even. Some people will even go that far, and I think that can be a mistake too. So every run should have an intention. And I tell mine that if you don't know why you have this on your calendar, then you need to ask me because there's a reason I wasted my time and put it on your calendar.
Well, sometimes the intention could be, all right, it's a recovery run. My intention is to have really smooth breathing. A lot of times that's the primary thing I focus on for recovery runs. How's my breathing feel right now? Can I just take really nice, steady breaths? Probably coming from, I spent several years teaching yoga as well. So another thing that kind of translated nicely.
Nice.
The intention doesn't have to be anything fancy or, overreaching. It could be something simple.
Yeah, I like that.
So for your training for your elevation, obviously you're going to be doing a lot of running on trails in West Virginia as much as you can as well. But do you do anything that's specific elevation training or strength training that kind of helps you in this type of climbing?
Great question. So we have one trail out here at the New River Gorge that's perfect for Ouray in some respects, just in terms of the steepness. It's called the Kmore Miners Trail, and it ends with the series of 800 odd steps. So in total, I think it's maybe 3/4 of a mile top to bottom. So it's not as tall or as long as the climbs in Ouray, but in terms of steepness, I think it averages around maybe 1,000 feet of gain per mile or so. And most of the climbs in Ouray, when you're actually climbing, are in the 1,000 to 1,200 feet of gain per mile range. So I definitely had 5-hour runs where, and I should say runs in quotes, where it's literally just going up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down that trail over and over and over again with my pack on. That's the closest simulation I can get on local trails. And then in terms of strength training, this is actually something I'm really going to focus on for next year's races, because I realize there's a bit of a gap there. So I just enlisted one of my fellow CTS coaches to help me with my strength training. We're going to do a lot of eccentric movement focus. So think split squats, 3 counts down, pause at the bottom, power up, even more plyometrics just to get my body used to the demands of the pounding of the downhills. So that's going to be a big part of the training, going through Arizona Monster, where there are some meaningful climbs. And then I cannot promise that I will be back at Ouray next year, but at this point, I haven't told my husband this yet. It's probably likely. So if that's on the calendar, this will be part of that programming as well.
That's awesome. So the other question I had on this is, I mentioned at the very beginning that this is a little less than 2 weeks ago that you ran this race. And so you look very fresh, very energetic right now. So how long did you take off from running since Ouray?
Let's see. Okay, so typically my recovery from a 100-miler would be week 1. If I feel like running, I might do a 30-minute super, super easy jog, probably a walk-run kind of combination. Weeks 2 and 3, up to 60 minutes or so. And again, especially if there are any uphills, I'll probably walk some of those. If I feel like my heart rate isn't quite under control, my legs still feel tired. Week 4, I'm usually starting to get back into my usual routine. No intensity, which is honestly my usual routine. But even if I did intensity, week 4, I wouldn't do it. So let's see. The race finished wee hours of the morning Sunday. And then admittedly, so Tuesday is when we started driving back to West Virginia from Colorado with our 2 hound dogs, which is a nightmare. So we did some very, very short kind of walk, run, maybe 30 minutes at a time, maybe 40 minutes. Each day we were driving back for the sole purpose of getting some puppy energy out before the drive. So I guess within a few days I was doing some short runs, but honestly, I probably wouldn't have if it was just, leaving it up to myself and what I actually wanted to do, because my legs were still tired. And I would have honored that a little bit more if circumstances allowed.
Yeah, so the reason I asked was, it feels like a lot of runners, myself included, we struggle after a race. We struggle with the lack of exercise or running, if you will. I mean, so we've all tapered going into our race. Yep. And so we've already decreased our routine day in and day out. And then we get done with the race and we're still somewhat scrambling in this lost taper mode, right? Of, I don't know what to do with my time. And so I struggle, I'll say it about me, I struggle being able to be slow on getting back to running, even though mentally I'm not there. Mentally, it's a sloth. I mean, I just hate it because I'm just not engaged with the same way I was going into the race, right? And so how do you get through the mental doldrums of it to like reconnect with even just the enjoyment of it all?
That's an interesting question. I think another thing that can make it even more difficult is Strava. Because sometimes we will see people do their 100-mile race and they crush it. And then the next weekend they're doing a 25-mile long run. And I'm thinking, even though every intellectual part of my brain and my training as a coach is saying that's probably not the best thing for longevity in the sport, that still just adds an element of pressure. Like, oh, should I be doing that? Am I slacking if I'm not running at all this week? Am I slacking if I'm taking 2 weeks off after this race? So I do think it's really important to block out what anybody else is doing after their equivalent race, because what they're doing is not necessarily best practice. To answer the question about, the post-race blues, I'll call it, I have not experienced those. I've been lucky to not really experience that lately. I kind of finished Ouray and immediately, maybe it's because I missed my time goal, immediately was thinking, all right, well, I need to get better. I need to get better and I'm ready to get better. So I'm more in a place of having to hold myself back so I don't do too much too soon and push my body beyond what it's ready for at this point, being a week and a half out from a 100-mile race. And so I'm just trying to, I'd say, drown myself in logic and saying, no, you may not run more than 60 minutes today, even if you feel like you could, even if you really want to. You know what you need to do? Be disciplined. Hold on for a few weeks. And maybe if there's some extra energy left at the end of the day, do some yoga, do some meditation, do something else that's productive, that's going to push my mind and body in the right direction versus potentially delaying my recovery. So I know that's not directly answering the question. I tend to be the do more person who has trouble holding myself back.
No, I mean, I'm wondering if you have that. I'm sorry, Steve. Go ahead.
I think recovering well is going to ultimately help you improve on the back end anyway. Like, so being able to hold yourself back and hold yourself accountable is great. And I think as coaches, that's what we need to do for our athletes too, as well.
Yeah, I think it's great. I was going to say, I wonder if the getting done with the Ouray and feeling just like this drive because you didn't hit your goal and stuff. You said you weren't even sure if you're doing Ouray next year, right? And so this drive, then you've got to be placing it on Arizona Monster 300. Like there's something that you're dropping that excitement or that burden to get better on with it showing up at a race that's on your calendar. And I do find that, myself included, that if I have a race on my calendar that's after this event, I tend to kind of re-engage faster. Like I can get back in it because I take how the experience went at the last, I'm like, what am I going to apply to the next one? I can kind of push forward. But if I don't have something on my calendar, there is a sense of all this effort has come to a conclusion. Now, how do I come out of that? Now, I'm not saying every runner needs to have something on their calendar and that, and all that. I say that, but I would love them to, because I find the sport is just fascinating, and I think they should continue to be driven to do hard things. And so I was just curious kind of how you did that. Now, I do want to switch a little bit and talk about low moments. Before the episode, we send all of our guests, like you yourself, some background questions to kind of give us an idea of who you are, and kind of gives us a playing field, if you will, of some areas we may want to talk about. And so one of the questions we asked was about low moments. And you responded. I'm going to read your response, because when Steve and I talked about it, we kind of we want to talk about this. You said, It's a tie. In Moab 240 and the Arizona Monster, I had a segment towards the end of each race where I was out in the desert alone, and I started to lose touch with reality. That's the part. To be out there by myself, feeling so confused, was a horrible, horrible feeling. So was this hallucinations?
I think it goes beyond that. It was, so I did Moab 240 in 2023, and going out for that last segment. So I didn't have a pacer. There was no one within probably an hour of me, both front and back. So I was just out there alone. It was nighttime. It was the final big section before the finish line. So I'd been out there for quite some time, and I thought that it was 2024, which was the year after. I thought I was just going back to the race course, checking out the course, just, revisiting it for the sake of memories. I truly could not figure out if I was still racing, if it was 2023 or 2024. And basically what I kept trying to call my husband on my cell phone, but I had no service, so I couldn't verify what was going on, why I was there. So the best I could do was I just looked for little footprints in the dust, and I just kept telling myself, follow the footprints, follow the footprints. And of course, I also had the GPX track on my phone, and for some reason had the consciousness to be checking that and just making sure I was still on the line. But other than that, it was literally just look for the footprints in the dust, follow those, and occasionally I would, again, have the presence of mind, check the GPX tracker. But I couldn't have told you until I popped out and saw my husband and my dad waiting for me. I couldn't have told you if I was still racing, why I was there, what year it was. It was just, and that's an unsettling feeling. And then something kind of similar happened in Arizona Monster, where I really felt good about my sleep plan for that race. I had come up with a plan where I was feeling really, really lucid, just super sharp for the entire time. And then there's this section. So there's a 60-mile segment towards the very end of the race where I did not have a pacer. And of those 60 miles, there was a 20-something mile segment that was really, really hot. And there was something about hitting that section alone, again, with nobody in sight, and having it be that hot. I think the heat plus the cumulative sleep deprivation just started to kind of push my mental limits. And again, and there's also this thing about that part of the course where you turn a corner, go uphill a little bit, there's a tree on the left, you loop around. You turn a corner, you go uphill a little bit, there's a tree on the left, you go around. And I guarantee you, every runner knows exactly what section I'm talking about right now. It's so repetitive that it starts to mess with your mind, and you start to think, am I somehow going in circles right now? And I feel like I'm in a cartoon, in the desert with sweat dripping off my face, slouching along, just going and going in circles. Fortunately, I did have cell service there. So I called my husband multiple times in that section and just said, am I in the right place? And am I going in the right direction? And by the end of that section, I called him and I was bawling because I was confused, and it just felt like I was never going to make it to the aid station. It just a similar feeling of, I'm in the desert by myself. I think I'm going in the right direction, but I'm not quite sure. And I think just that uncertainty, that it's disorienting.
It's not a hallucination, but it's definitely disorienting. Steve, you've done Cocodona 250 a few times. Have you ever felt disconnected from reality like that? Sorry.
Yeah, that's a great way.
It's very unsettling. There's one section, the second year I did it, in between Dead Horse and I think that next section where it's just like rolling desert, like kind of rolling plains, and it's all the same, and you're out in the middle of nowhere. That one, I think I left a piece of my soul out there somewhere. It's still out there. I'm still looking for it. It's certainly, yeah, and like there were people in front of me. You could see like headlamps and stuff like that, but then you start thinking they're cars, and then you're passing through the BLM camps. You're going right past people's tents, and you're like, why is there somebody camping out here in the middle of nowhere? You really do feel like that, like you're on another planet and you have no idea what's going on. So that's the best thing you can do, is try to tie yourself back to reality with the GPX file and just say, hey, let's keep moving forward, because that's the only way I'm
follow
going to
the line. Follow the red line.
Yeah, it does feel like you're out there forever.
Yeah, I feel like this is an issue with lack of sleep for y'all, because I don't feel this way in a 100-mile race. And I bet y'all don't feel like that in a typical 100-mile race. This is probably in y'all's multi-day events. Did you feel that way in Ouray because it was 2 days, or not?
I felt I was completely sharp in Ouray. Really, the only time I had hallucinations 1 year in Ouray. I think it was the year that it took 49 hours, where, going up the final climb, Bridge of Heaven, I see this person waving an American flag in the woods, and I was like, well, that's cool, but it's definitely not happening. But yeah, otherwise, typically I can go 48 hours or so feeling really, really good. I tend to do really well with sleep deprivation. There's something about the combination of that plus heat that seems to do me in. And one of my biggest lessons from Moab, because really that's kind of a dangerous situation to put yourself in, and I never would have done that intentionally. One of the biggest lessons I tell my athletes is, all right, I know what this section is like, and there are drop-offs, and it's technical, and it's dangerous if you're not thinking clearly. So if you're about to go into that section and you're not feeling 100% lucid, you need to take a nap before you go. And I apply the same thing to myself now. If I know that I'm going into a section with cliffs or, a lot of exposure, I need to make sure that I either take a nap before I start, or I'm very willing to lay down and take a nap during that section if I start to feel like I'm not handling myself appropriately.
So one of the goals of this podcast is to kind of help people put together their own plan for running ultras and stuff. And something you just said, I think, is one of the reasons I'm kind of personally like nervous or terrified, if you will, to run one of these multi-day events in a desert over with these drop-offs, right? Because I have gotten so lethargic in a 100-mile race where I just kind of started veering off to the side because I was so tired, right? And so how, if I don't have a coach and if I have never run the course, how can I find out what are the areas of a course like the Moab 240 or something that I'm interested in running, that I should be prepared to make sure I take a nap or I get some rest going into that? Like, how do I know that in advance, or how can I find that out?
That's a great question. I think nowadays it's a little bit tricky because there's so many new 200 milers that not every race you're going to sign up for is going to have great race reports and, videos that people have done that show you the course, to tell you an in-depth description. For a lot of them that have been around for a long time, like the destination trail races, Cocodona, you can find some great information. And just by reading the course description, you can get a sense for which sections are going to be more technical, which sections will you probably need to be a little more sharp for. There are also so many people who have taken their GoPros out and filmed a lot of these races. So I would start there. I bet you could also just find people through Strava who have done the races and reach out to them and say like, hey, could I get some advice on this? I would never, if anyone ever reached out to me and asked, hey, can I pick your brain about Ouray, or can I pick your brain about Arizona Monster? I'd love to have that conversation. I would absolutely be willing to say, you know what? These are the two sections where if you're going to have a pacer, like I would prioritize these, or these are the sections where you want to make sure you feel really fresh going into them or have the extra water here. I would say find people who have done it, who can share the stuff that you just can't find through a Google search.
Yeah, I thought it was a great point when you talked about how you tell your runners about different spots, because that's from your experience. I mean, I know you can also email race directors. Race directors will share that information as well, but a lot of people don't think in terms of how to get that information. Like, they don't even try. They don't know about doing it. And I think that's helpful. I think that's a really good piece of advice that people can kind of do. So I'd like to talk about DNFs. So the reason is because I've DNF'd a few races. I think, Steve, you've never DNF'd, have you? I think, you make the rest of us look dumb.
The only one was the backyard can be considered.
Okay, everybody DNFs unless you win. So, okay, that doesn't count. So I have DNF'd a few races, and I know you have as well. In your email, I think you put a comment on that as well. So I kind of wanted to talk about it from this perspective. How do you prevent the DNF at a race from carrying over to your next race? Because you know what I'm talking about? You know what I mean by that? Because sometimes it kind of sits, and you're like, and then you line up at the next one, you're like, I hope I got my stomach thing. Like, okay, I'll use Ouray. I hope I have my stomach right in the first 60 miles because I know it's going to give me a challenge. Like, how do you not take that challenge and bring it into your next race as a negative?
For me, one of the best parallels I can draw is I'm one of those people who rolls my ankle all the time. I either break or sprain my ankle probably once a year, and it to the point where you can imagine the mental block that I would have going into a race like Ouray, where there are these steep technical descents, and it would be so easy to get completely absorbed in this negative train of thought, like, when is it going to happen? When is it going to happen? Don't roll your ankle. And that's exhausting. It's completely exhausting. So something that and actually when we were out in Breckenridge prepping for Ouray, I had one day where I rolled my ankle 3 times in the same training run. And of course, that just did a number on me mentally. And after that point, I just started thinking, as soon as I caught myself feeling like, oh, what if I roll my ankle again? What if I roll my ankle again? I had to say, nope, this is today. This is not that run last week where I kept rolling it over and over again. This is today, and I'm going to do the best that I can do today. And what I did last week is not necessarily something that's going to happen again today. So that's the best perspective that I would try to share. And like today, like Ouray 2025 is not Ouray 2024, and Ouray 2026 will not be Ouray 2025. It's a completely unique scenario. And in theory, I'm going into it with a whole lot more information than I've ever had. And that would be the other thing. So have that mentality of like, this is now. This is not that time when those things went wrong. So it doesn't have to be that way, but also learn from what happened last time. If you got lazy about your nutrition, don't do that again. Like, work on that and practice it. If you didn't change your socks at mile 50 and you really should have, and then you ended up with foot issues, fix it. Like, you have the opportunity to address all of those things and then go into it with mentality like, this is a new race. This is a singular experience. So let's see what we can do. And I really like the mantra, do your best, do your absolute best. It doesn't matter what the people in front of you are doing. It doesn't matter what the people behind you are doing. I always try to think, I want to do my best, and I hope that everybody else out here has the best possible race that they can have. Like, let's all have a great experience.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I've been down the land that I have to accept the fact that it happened first, right? Like, a lot of people don't like to accept it. Like, you need to accept the fact that it happened. And I personally am kind of dumb, but I've changed the name of DNFs to Do Not Forget is how I call them for myself. Is this idea that if I have a DNF, then I need to figure out what not to forget from that experience. And so I can take it as something that I've learned from. And it's just my way of remembering I need to learn from every mistake and everything that goes well. I also use that same kind of idea when I have a positive race of what went well and not just rest on that. I think people make that, error as well. But how do we get better?
Add to that, sometimes I ask myself the question, because a lot of the DNFs that you'll see on my ultrasignup page were due to extreme circumstances where DNFing was 100% the right thing to do. And I know in my core that it was the right thing to do. And then when I continue to feel bad about it or embarrassed or frustrated, I ask myself, if ultrasignup didn't exist, would I care? Would I feel this bad? And usually the answer is no. And then I realize, oh, this is just an ego thing. This is not, I did something wrong or I did something bad and I should feel embarrassed. This is purely an ego thing. So that might be a question to ask too. If ultrasignup didn't exist, would this actually bother me so much right now? And chances are sometimes the answer will be yes, but sometimes the answer will probably be no.
Yeah. Steve, I wish you had DNF'd a race, because this next thing I'm about to say, it would really be helpful if you had DNF'd also. Right, just pretend. So
I just run easy races, Jeff.
No, you don't. That is insanity also. That's a lie. So, and I think I'm going to put it on you because it's on me, right? I feel like there is a pressure that we have also self-applied because we coach runners, right?
Yeah.
That there is this performance expectation. I'm like, people, have y'all looked at me? I'm slow. It's okay. And I think that we have this idea. And even not the runners we even work with, they don't even have that of us. They don't have that expectation. But in our community of fellow coaches, right? In our community of other runners, we have this thing that, are we supposed to carry ourselves a certain way? How are we going to perform? You're part of CTS. There's a great group of coaches of all that. There's a level set of expectations that sometimes comes on top of us that is different, and it's not always healthy.
I have two thoughts. So I try to use what you're describing as motivation for myself. When I was out in Ouray, for example, feeling sick and puking on my husband's shoes, et cetera, and just generally feeling sorry for myself. Oh, I'm not going to hit my time goal. I feel so sick. Oh, this is so sad. I remind myself, your athletes are watching you. They're watching that little dot on the tracker. They're hoping the best for you. And they're also expecting me to set an example. So I better do my best to set an example for them and do the things that I would tell them to do. My parents went all the way out to Colorado to help me with this race. My husband dedicated time to help me with this race. So sometimes that alone gets me through those dark moments where I think, no, you better get it together, because all of these people are working to help you with this thing. And if you're just going to be out here feeling sorry for yourself or feeling pressure, get over it. Instead, set a good example for those people and do your absolute best as you would tell them to do. So I do try to turn it around and remember that people are watching, and they're watching because they care. And they're also watching because they can learn from what you're doing if you do a good job. So that's thing number one. And also what you were saying reminds me of Arizona Monster. So earlier this year, I did the race. It went really well. It's the first kind of significant outcome that I really had in a race. So that felt really good. And then for some reason, a month or so later, I felt really compelled to sign up again, because I thought, I bet I could go faster if I corrected a few things. And when I mentioned that to someone I know, they're like, well, what if you don't win again? Are you going to feel really bad about that? And my response was well, being afraid of not winning isn't a good reason to not try something. So I also just kind of use that pressure and the possibility of failure and knowing that people are watching me to just do my best. That's the best that I can do out there.
I like it a lot.
Yeah,
Steve, you're about to say
I
something.
think I think that do your best on the day that you are given. I think that's the biggest thing that you can do in any one of your races. And that's what you would ask of your athletes too anyway. So whether if that comes with a DNF or not, then as long as you did your best and you know that you did your best, then one of the things I try to tell people is like not to die in the chair, because like 10 minutes later, when they feel better and their stomach settles, they're going to be like, man, I could have pushed a little bit further.
I also feel like I'm a representative of my company and of my family and of, frankly, my state, because as we all know, there are some fabulous ultra runners coming out of West Virginia now, but this is not the land that's known for producing a bunch of competitive ultra runners. So I really feel like I'm a representative of these different communities and of my athletes and of the state that I'm coming from. So I try to use that as fuel, and I try to remember that if someone takes a picture of me or asks me a question during a race, I need to make sure I've got a smile on my face if I'm not crying. and I just need to keep that in the back of my mind.
I like that a lot. Steve, are you trying to get ultra runners in West Virginia yourself?
Yeah, we actually host a race out in West Virginia.
What's it called?
It's called the RAF Trail Series. It's in Morgantown, right at Cooper's Rock State Forest.
Awesome.
So if you're around in October, when is it? October 11th this year. It's a 50K, 25K, 10K, and a 5K.
Awesome. Very cool. I love seeing the sport grow in our state.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great. We'd love to have you if it fits into your training plan.
There you go. Steve, and I don't mind us plugging your race even. That race, though, is in honor of your friend, right?
Yeah, it's in honor of my friend Robin Ames, who passed away. He got hit by a distracted driver when he was riding his bike on the way home from work in Brewston Mills, right outside of Morgantown. So we use that as one of our ways to raise money for engineering students in West Virginia, along with, bringing about education for the dangers of distracted driving.
Yeah, it's awesome. So they call it the RAF Trail Series. So it's the Robin Ames Foundation, which is what RAF means. Because a lot of people are like, what's he saying? He's saying raft? I'm like, no, it's RAF.
Yeah,
RAF.
RAF.
So,
yeah.
I think it's great. Steve, you and I've talked about it for a few years now. I think it's a really cool thing that you and his family are involved in, and everybody that's part of that board as well. I think it's an awesome race. Yeah. So check it out. It's in October. You're welcome, man. Let's talk about coaching, because we're running out of time here a little bit. So we were curious about your thoughts on coaching with the direction that the world is going to, if you will, right? So and I'll read it kind of how we wrote it. It's like, with all the new things happening with AI and static plans that are available on the internet, how do you think this is going to impact the future of coaching, particularly us online coaches or those in that space? Like, how do you think it's going to affect coaching in general? So to guess.
I fully expect that it will. I would expect it should get to the point where you could connect with your AI coach through Training Peaks or whatever platform you're using, and it can give you workouts. It can probably analyze your workouts and tell you, this was too fast, this was too slow. I would imagine we'll get to a point where it would be a pretty proficient resource if your goals are, I want to have workouts that make sense, and I want some feedback on my workouts so that I can make sure I'm doing them well. Mm-hmm. I would expect that those two things would be really well accomplished through AI. What I don't expect it would be able to do, at least as well, and maybe I'm underestimating the capabilities of AI, would be, hey, athlete Jim, like you had a ton of acid reflux on your last long run. Like, let's talk about the things that you were eating and drinking. What'd you have for dinner the night before? And let's do some nutrition experiments next time. Or athlete Sally, you've been feeling kind of sad lately. Like, your energy seems low. What's going on? Let's talk about work. Let's talk about stress. Let's talk about the kids. And let's make sure that your training is being adjusted for all of those things. I still think there's an enormous human aspect. And there's also just a lot of trial and error involved in our sport, both in the nutrition, the hydration, how you use your energy, your rest days, how hard you can push yourself beyond the data from your watch and the data in Training Peaks or whatever platform you're using. I still think there's going to be a tremendous amount of value there. And that's why I have Zoom check-ins with all of my athletes once or twice a month, or sometimes more frequently than that. It's because we talk about those things like, how's your sleep going beyond the sleep score from your watch? How's work going? Do we need to make adjustments? And just all the qualitative stuff. it's hard to imagine all of that could be covered as thoroughly by a non-human. At least that's my perspective.
Yeah. I mean, I agree to a lot of that. You know, I offer my runners the opportunity to have a call. If they ever want to have a call, they can do it as frequently as we want. I do all that too. I think what I believe we're going to be setting ourselves apart is that people are going to still crave connection. There's only so much. I mean, I love data. I love being informed. I love figuring things out and being told this is the right and wrong type of answer and stuff. But there's an element of being understood that I think people crave, like to feel like you understand me. You know, it's kind of like we're all talking right now and you both are nodding your heads. That's important visual cues that you give me because it lets me know that the words I'm saying are making sense to you. And so if somebody's listening to this podcast and what we've been talking and they're like, yeah, I get that. That's the idea of being understood. And I'm not sure if everyone's going to connect in an understanding way necessarily. I think they're going to believe that AI understands their situation, but that doesn't necessarily understand them. And I think that's the piece that's going to be there. But I do think there's going to be a lot of great things that are going to come out of it. I think there's going to be a way that if you want to get plans and stuff like that, I think they're going to be possible. But I was just curious. It's one of those things that kind of it impacts my full-time job that I have that's outside of coaching. And so it's one of those curiosities I have.
Well, you also just used the word feel too. And we were just talking about DNF. Like, are you going to talk to AI about that DNF you just had last weekend and how crummy it feels?
Some
and
people
how
do.
embarrassed you feel?
Yeah.
Do you really?
Some people are doing that.
Yeah,
now.
they do.
Yeah.
Yep, they have relationships with their AI.
Does it sympathize or empathize?
It sympathizes or empathizes in whatever algorithm that's like programmed into it. That's what they've been doing. Like it pretends to feel, you know.
It's
but
crazy.
It doesn't know what it feels like to DNF.
It doesn't.
No.
But it's getting better at responding to what you feel. And so that's going to be, so it's evolving and it's some really great technology. And so I'm not against AI, and some people are like, you should be. I'm not. But I am. I'm very curious about how it will transform our desire for human connection more and more. And I think that's going to show up where experiences are going to matter in everything that we do, the more that we feel that that's kind of taking care of itself. Right. So for the sake of time, I hate to kind of just jump all over the place a little bit, but where do I want to go? And towards the end of all of our episodes, we do this portion or this segment we call Coach's Corner, and we ask for listeners to kind of submit a question that they can ask about any topic that they want to, and we do our best to kind of fill in the question or answer the question here on the show. We invite our guest to do that as well. So it's truly Coach's Corner because you're also a coach, and so you are going to have the best answer of all of us, we're hoping, because sometimes Steve and I just kind of like muddy our way through this as best we can. Now, I did have a question that came from Troy, but I won't ask you that right now because I've got an actual question I do need to ask you instead. He had lots of good questions for you, but
did you ask who's your favorite athlete that you work with?
He kind of went that direction, but I'm not going to put him on blast like you just did. So good job, Troy. No, but so for Coach's Corner though today, the question comes from Brooklyn. And the reason this is important is because Brooklyn is our social media manager. She's actually the host that hosted our episode last week, in our last episode that we released before this one. And there's a lot of questions that we had that she had that I told her we've run out of time. I'm sorry. And so she had just decided to pirate Coach's Corner and take it over and use this for hers. So that's where the question comes from today. It's from Brooklyn. All right. She said, what are your thoughts on run-walk intervals and how to manage them in a race? In other words, do we change them in a race or what do we do with them? So anybody want to go? Anybody want to go first? I mean, I don't want to go first.
I've got a recent example, actually.
I do run walks all the time. What do you got then, Anne? You want to go first?
I think they're genius if you need that strategy to maintain the right RPE. So let's say, actually, this is a perfect season to be talking about this because it's summer and so many of our athletes are running in 100-degree weather. And maybe the only way to have a true recovery run is to do a walk-run combination. Otherwise, if you're just trying to continue running, your heart rate's spiking, the effort is spiking, it's just not feasible. So that's a really solid application. I'll tell you another one, Arizona Monster. So there is a segment of that race that is bike path. So almost pancake flat. It's pavement. And I also hit it in the middle of the night. And what I realized is, A, I feel really sleepy right now. And B, it would be so easy to get lazy right now because we're halfway through the race. It's tempting to just start walking for a while. And before you know it, you've been walking for 45 minutes. So I ended up setting an interval timer on my phone for 2 minutes of walking, 1 minute of running. It took some tweaking to find, a combination that felt reasonable. And my husband, who was pacing me at the time, we did that the entire night. 2 minutes of walking, 1 minute of running, just listening for the beeps. And it both kept us focused. It kept us moving with intention. And it also, I think, just helped keep us awake because we had something that we had to keep doing. Granted, if the running beep ever happened on like the tiniest little uphill, we would skip it because that's not appropriate to do. I couldn't maintain the right RPE. But that was an application, like a flat trail where that helped me stay focused, maintain my RPE, and move with intention. I think that's a perfect race application. In the exact same race, later on in another segment where I'm alone and lonely and feeling kind of lazy, but on a trail, I tried the exact same thing. It did not work whatsoever because the trail was too variable. It was too hilly. And I realized very quickly, like, no, this is a great recipe for just having my RPE go all over the place. So I shut that down. But there was, like, in the right circumstances and the right running environment, I think it can be really powerful to keep you on track and also make sure that you're managing your effort appropriately.
That's a great answer. Steve, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think the exact same thing happened to me in Cocodona as we went through like the Coconino National Forest. The only way I could stay awake was running, but I couldn't run that far. So I did an interval. I just ran, walk, and it kept me awake the whole night and kept going. And there was a time I screwed it up too when I ran Blackbeard's Revenge 100 miler last year with my mother. We kept a very consistent 4-minute run, 2-minute walk the entire time until mile 54, and she eventually dropped. She will get her buckle this year when she goes back, but I was going to be the big bad ultra runner, and I took off after mile 54 and started running, and I was like, this is great, but then I gassed out at like the next aid station, so then I went right back to the run walk intervals. So I was like, why am I beating myself up? I'm just going to go back to run walk. So it was great.
Yeah, I'm a fan of run walk. I'm a huge fan of run walk. I'm a mid to the backpacker all the time. And I recognize the fact that I'm going to walk in my ultra at some point. So why don't I just be intentional about it from the start? And so during the summertime particularly, and I have super long runs, and I say anything over 15 miles, 20 miles for sure, I'm going to be doing a run walk because I'm going to practice it anyway in the summer. And I believe a run walk should be practiced. And the reason I say that is because of that exertion level that you talked about. I think if you want to be good at a run walk, you need to understand what distance or what time you want for your run portion and your walk portion. And the reason I say that is because a lot of runners will take that run portion and they will start walking because they need to. And I think if you're running that long to where you need to walk, you've run too long. And so the run walk is really intended to be just a measured change of consistency. I mean, it's consistent, but it's a measured change. Like we're going to keep flipping over. And so having a short run and a short walk is a really good, process to kind of work through it. And I think a lot of folks don't run with intention. They don't run easy and walk with intention. So on the run walk, it's run easy, walk with intention. Instead, they run hard and walk exhausted. That's a horrible approach. It's not interval training, right? Run walk is balanced exertion. And so if you walk with intention and run easy, then it's balanced exertion. And the problem is, again, I'll say it one more time, run walk is not an interval. It's not interval training. So don't do it that way. You don't run to the point you're running faster than you would normally because you think you feel good. Then you're just making yourself tired to have to walk. And I think that's where they do it wrong. And I think you should adjust your run walk to her question. Like you should adjust it through the course of the race. Sometimes you're going to feel comfortable running a little bit longer than you are now or walking more than you need to. And then other times you are going to feel like you need to run shorter and walk longer. But at a minimum, to your point, Anne, if you're not continuing to run even for at least 20 to 30 seconds, you kind of lose, that you lose the momentum there. So that, Brooklyn, is the answer to your question for run walk. So anything else we want to add to that, anybody?
I'd add one thing. If anyone is listening to that and thinking, oh, that's a strategy for a back of the packer, but I'm not a back of the packer, I would say the same strategy could be applied whether you're trying to be competitive or not. And then the mentality becomes, all right, if I can run this at the correct RPE that is my target for this race, then I better be running it. And if I cannot run this at the target RPE, that's my cue to take the power hiking break.
Yeah. And I think they'll surprise themselves if they embrace it with their time.
Yeah.
That's what I found, is that you surprise yourself. So, well, Anne, thank you so much for being a part of our Coach's Corner. And Brooklyn, we apologize for not answering it last week when Steve and I were your guests, but we appreciate you making us do it this week. But no, again, seriously, and we do appreciate you. We think you're fantastic. And I know we spend a lot of time kind of grilling you more on coaching type related questions, but you come with just a huge amount of knowledge and experience. And I think we would be remiss not to go that direction. I think you're a very accomplished runner. Like, you've done some incredible stuff. Now, you mentioned in one of your answers, which we didn't touch on, that at some point you're really working on allowing yourself to believe that you can do awesome things. And when we look at your Ultra sign up, you have done some awesome things, and you should definitely celebrate that. And I think it's very commendable of you. And so that's something that sometimes, we're really good at showering celebrations on our runners that we work with, but it's okay to hear it for ourselves and accept it about ourselves. So you've done some really good stuff.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Told me I have to stop calling myself slow. That's another thing that I am working on.
Absolutely.
Especially, surrounded by CTS coaches who are super strong. I'm kind of used to being the slowest person in the group. And she said, you should really stop saying that.
That's right.
So I'm going to try to embrace that.
Well, because people want to work with you for a reason, and it's not because you're with other CTS coaches. It's because you care about them, you care about the sport, and you do your best, and you want the best for them. And that's kind of why Steve and I do the same thing. It's not so much that there's these other affiliations. It's the fact that we have this desire to really just help people. And I think that comes out with you. It comes out with the runner that we have a mutual friend. And so I think that there's a lot that you've got going for you, and super grateful for you to take the time to hang out with us on this show. So thank you for being a part. We appreciate you being here. And so if you're listening to the episode and this is your first time hearing us, we are grateful for you joining us for your first Blueprint Ultra podcast. If you've been around the show for any length of time, then we please implore you to make sure you give us a like, comment, subscribe, whatever the cool things all the cool kids are doing. Just do those as well. We'd appreciate it. And again, thank you so much for being on the show, and we appreciate you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right.
Absolutely.
For those listening, thank you again, and we will talk to you again soon. See ya.